Today, I have the pleasure of connecting with Cathrine Cook, a fellow mother here in the UK, and what I would call an activated sacred feminine, because you are taking action with your Facebook group, Awakened Travel. And we're going to get in that today, Cathrine. But first, I want to do a little intro because I am so passionate about this subject matter, and it's end times madness right now. I mean, it's like do or die, life or death. It feels like everything's on the line to those of us who are activated and awake. And really, for me, I think it all comes down to the actionability and accountability of the awakened individual. I mean, the systemic degradation of our basic human rights and the demoralization of our society by enforcing admiralty law, maritime law over the law of the land, right? Over natural law is robbing us of our fundamental freedoms, liberties, and sovereignty. And really, awakening is all about responsibility. It's like no one's going to come down here and save us. It's up to us. It's on our hands to really leverage the ability to respond. And that's why I was drawn to your work, because I see that you're doing that. You're being responsive and responsible with your platform. And it's really wonderful to see, because it's clear to me you've heard the clarion call of us awakened souls who are really activated, right? And really, we're refusing to acquiesce to the archonic matrix of dominance, of usury and control. And we wish to walk upon the soil of our beautiful planet freely, as according to our divine blueprint, our birthright as sentient beings, right? To experience the entirety of the earth plane as our very own Garden of Eden, and to explore it in all of its glory. And you really, I can see you've put yourself out there to be the change you wish to see in the world. And I so really admire you for that. You have initiated a collaboration that is really encouraging tens of thousands of us to come together, get more resourceful, innovative, inventive, and creative with how we are navigating around these restrictions and the nefarious travel bans. And I think it's funny to me because the more they suppress, the more it gives rise to choice. Awakened choice. And that is the name of your website. So we're going to get into that as well, your new website. And it's a freedom forum for those of us who do not consent to what I call the compliance consciousness constructs, and who instead choose to empower ourselves by exercising our free will and co-creating new and exciting alternatives, not only to travel, but also just to living life. And I've been scrolling through your feed, and it's amazing. I mean, there's so many palpably positive posts that people are saying things like, I wrote them down. This group has saved my life. This group is so amazing and therapeutic. This group has restored my sanity. I could go on and on and on. It's like going far beyond just serving the functional role as a free travel provider. You're really creating community via emotional healing. And that's what I'm all about. Mm-hmm. So what's your take on the viral nature of the platform?
I think I've loved exactly everything that you said. It's so powerful. And actually I got really emotional there when you just read some of those comments, because, I genuinely, this was about me as a mum, just feeling like, well, I can't find what I want to find, so I'm going to have to create it. And so that's what I did. I just created this group. I had no expectations whatsoever over it, just that my hope was that I could connect with some like-minded people. And when you connect with like-minded people, you are strengthened. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And every single day, there were more and more thousands of people joining it. And it gave you that feeling of we are not alone, and it strengthens you to know that. And the fact that it continues to grow in that way is just amazing. It's like a hug, literally that's how it feels. It really does feel like a hug. But you are absolutely right. When we know stuff, we have a responsibility to share that. We absolutely do. And what I was finding was that I was constantly learning about different things. But then as a mum, I would say more so than anything, it affected me hugely. So I got to the point just before December where I felt super low, and my job is in natural health, and I use emotional support, but we're using essential oils, and I have used these essential oils the whole way through to help me, and they have been absolutely amazing, and I don't know how I would be without them. But it just kind of got to a point where there's so much information that I desperately felt like, well, actually, what can I do? Like, I feel like a helpless person in this whole situation. Like, I don't have control over what happens. And that's when I decided, you know what, I don't have control over this, but I do have control over what I do. And so that was when this kind of idea of connecting with people through Facebook was kind of born. And the awakened side of it was really, really important to me, because I wanted it to be almost like a clear message that if people understood what that meant, then they were meant to be in this group. And so that was why it had to be a really specific name. And I had been thinking about this, and I woke up in the night and I had to write this down, like on a notepad by my bed. I was like, this is what it's got to be called. I literally had those feelings, and it was very intense that I needed to do it. And of course, life is busy. So I was like, right, I will do it. And it just kept coming. I need to sort this out. And so I did. And I think probably the craziest part of it is the fact that there's loads of people really local to us all, and we just don't know. And that is so empowering, because I've been able to make connections and friendships that I would never have done without all of this. And I do believe that you have to use hard times to actually create positive outlooks and positive, things. You have to do that, because we can't always have that really high vibration. We cannot sustain it, but we have to ride it. So, if we're feeling low, then we need to think, okay, what do I need to focus on to pull me back out of that sort of deep feeling? And so that was why I needed to create this group, so that I could support people to have a place on Facebook that they could go to be surrounded by people who think and who are like-minded to them, but without all the intense information that we do need to know, but not see constantly. And that was one of the really important aspects of this group. So I wanted it to be a safe space so people could come, communicate, and feel lifted. And those messages were beautiful, that really, and I've had loads of lovely private messages from people, that have been able to find friendships that they, felt so alone, and they do not feel alone anymore. And that is just, we're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be together. We're meant to be supported. And so that was really, really important to me, for sure. So yeah, I think that was the main kind of journey for the platform. And then as time went on, I think it was like day 3 or 4, I had a message from a lady, and she said, Cathrine, you need to do a website. You're not going to be able to sustain this growth. You need to get a website, because people are saying, where can I see this, and where can we talk about these things that's not going to be affected, or, the powers that be on that site, remove them. We've had so many alerts where, don't worry, is basically paraphrasing, don't worry, we've removed 90 posts from your Facebook group that threatened your group. And it's like, whoa, they are genuinely constantly filtering and watching. And I think that's probably the hardest thing for me, is that I am definitely, I will stand up for what's right. And how you have flags, right? So my biggest flag is injustice. If there's something that's unjust, it makes me really go, this is not okay. We need to do something about it. And so when people send in posts that I wholeheartedly agree with, that's the hardest bit. I can't post them in the group, because I'm trying to protect the safe space. At the same time, I'm like, So I have to message every single person saying this is a great one, but this can't go in the group right now because of where it is. So it is like this kind of, we're still protecting this safe space, and we want to keep it going so that it is positive, uplifting. And as a group grows, there is definitely an element of we have to protect that more intensely, because with any growth, it kind of progresses. Sometimes you might have people that come in and they don't really understand the whole stuff. And that's the other thing that I have found really, really interesting about this group, is that people have joined that aren't really awake. And so it's kind of, they are the minority in this group. And so it's been really, really interesting for their growth and their knowledge. And I liken this to a ladder, because I think that, we're on this journey, and some people may be further up that ladder in their knowledge of what's going on. And some people might just literally land in the group and go, whoa, I've not seen any of this before. And so they've started on that ladder. And we have to make sure that this is a really safe space for them to learn and progress in their learning and climb up that ladder. Because if we don't, and that ladder's got broken rungs and then they fall off and it's an unpleasant space, they will not stay in this space. And the more positive kind of environment that we create for them, the more people actually start this journey and basically wake up. And that type of vehicle is really exciting.
It is beyond exciting. And you really hit the nail on the head there, because if you just start dropping intense truth bombs on people who aren't ready for it, their consciousness has not allowed that for them to come to believe yet, then you're just, boom, met with cognitive dissonance, cognitive rigidity, confirmation bias, and all the mechanisms in place that are there to protect them from things that they can't cope with yet. And I love that you're being really sensitive and reflective about that. And that's like emotional sentience. Like I call it sentient intelligence or heart IQ, where you're really implementing that within the group, and you're taking that next step because you've preempted that reaction. And that is allowing for this really nurturing, fostering community that I can see is actually waking people up, because it's embracing them. It's not pushing them away. And we were talking before we started recording about like our own little ways of playing 5D chess. And my film was one of those as well, because I could see that it's through our processing of emotions and the releasing of our traumas that we actually raise our consciousness and we become able to hold higher states of awareness, if you will. Yeah. And, I knew that the big old fat red pill just wasn't going to work for a large proportion, the majority, arguably, of the population. And that maybe getting around it by, a softer, gentler approach is the way. And I see that you're doing that as a mother, you're doing that, but you're also at the same time holding that kind of lioness roar because, because you're doing something about it today. And I think that's amazing, because I've seen so many posts on the channel, like saying things like, oh, I'm inspired not to wear a mask for the first time today. Thanks, guys. I didn't even know that this was possible. I didn't know that people could do this and it would be okay. And that just warms my heart to no end. It's incredible. Yeah. So I want to know what your personal catalyst was for starting this platform.
Okay, so I have never worn a mask ever. My children have never worn masks. My youngest, my oldest is in secondary school, so he was very much in a situation where masks were required. And so my journey started of this kind of lioness 100%. When it comes to your cubs, you're way more intense. And then my family, my mum has always been, awake. She has always been. And so thanks to that, that ladder, I was already halfway up that ladder from a very, very young age. But, for example, my spouse, my husband, and his family potentially weren't, they had to go slowly on that journey. And so you have to hold that safe space for them to be able to come in gently. You can't push anyone in. Like there's no, that's never going to help them. They have to actually have that thought process. And this is the thing, like, you know how you said that as this intensifies, more and more people are coming to it. It is totally true, because they realize that they've done everything that they've been told to do, and yet freedoms are still missing. And so eventually, majority of the people start to think there is something wrong. Now, from the very beginning, we've been like, there's something wrong with this whole situation. Like my husband, myself, and so we had to kind of think, right, how are we going to protect our family from so first of all, we got the TV gone. That was it, switch that off. It's the most empowering thing ever.
Yes.
And then what's really hard though, isn't it, with family members who watch it every day, they cannot understand. So for example, my dad and his wife, she's very much, this is the truth, because it's from, I should probably not say the main channel in the UK. Okay, yes. So it is from that main channel. It was clearly, overseen by the Queen. So it is absolute truth. This is what they believe, because that's what they've been fed the whole way through their life. And so I feel that as a friend, as a mum, as connections that you have to drop tiny little bits of information to start to make people think, not just here's all the information. So by dropping little pieces of information, for example, the PCR tests, like that's just a fact. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and she basically said, that's interesting. I'm going to send it to some science friends of mine to look into that. And I just kind of was like, well, I don't see what an opinion has to do with this, because it's literally, this is what's on the end of them. This is what the government website says that this does. So I don't think there's actually an opinion involved in this, because a lot of the time people believe that it's our opinion. So that's fine, that's your opinion. But actually, it's not that, is it? It's science. And unfortunately, the people who are feeding us the science, they're not putting the correct stuff in front of us. And if we look really, really hard, we can see the truth, because it is somewhere. And that's what's really difficult. So on these tests, it will say sterilized EO. You've probably seen that, right? Yeah. And that is already deceptive. They aren't even writing what it is. You have to go back and research on their little leaflet inside, which nobody tends to do. They just see the word sterilized and they think, oh, great, it's sterilized. And then they just don't research what it is. So in a roundabout way, I need to help wake more people up, because my children will suffer if we don't. And they feel isolated and alone, especially my teenager. He's like, his school friends, he's been told by them, you're going to kill my grandma because you don't wear a mask. He even recorded in his pocket, I'm so proud of him. He recorded in his pocket. There's one particular teacher there that's really intense. He pressed record in his pocket, and she came over and she was really aggressive about him not wearing a mask, and basically said, so are you medically exempt, or have you just decided you're not wearing a mask? And he literally said, very politely, said, actually, under the Equalities Act 2010, you're not actually legally allowed to ask me that. And I remember just thinking, wow. And I just thought, that is amazing. You're 13. And that sort of strength we need to help our children to have that. Because there's definitely a difference between living in the world and being of the world. Like, we are in this world. So in actual fact, we do have a responsibility to try and help others see that this is okay. The example of the masks, that's my favorite, because even some of my family members, they're like, oh, it's just a mask. And I'm like, it's not just a mask. It's a signal that this is acceptable, and it isn't acceptable. It is 100% not acceptable, along with all the other side of, constricting your breathing. But to me, the biggest thing is you're telling them that you will do anything that they tell you to do. And that is way beyond what's acceptable for me. I genuinely believe that we have to take a stand. And, the lanyards that people can get, that's that safety net that people can do. And I was in the shop the other day without a mask. I didn't have a lanyard. And one of my things is I'm a people person. I love to talk to people. I actually genuinely like people to like me. Okay. I do. This is something that I genuinely do. And so when I go into a shop without a mask, it actually goes against my feelings of wanting people to like me, because I know that people looking at me are like, oh, she's not put a mask on. And so they dislike you straight away. And so it took me quite significant amount of strength to deal with those emotions myself, to kind of go, do you know what? It's okay. Just smile. And every single time, like it happened yesterday, I was in a DIY store, and this man was staring at me in the queue, like really angry. And so I smiled at him. That wasn't enough. He was still staring. And then he's probably 3 or 4 people away from me. And I sort of said, hiya, are you all right? Are you enjoying the weather? Of course, he was like, oh, she's just spoken to me. And he couldn't be rude. So he sort of said, yes, thank you. And then turned around. But you see, I took back control of that situation. I'm not going to be, put down with the eyes, because it is just their eyes, really. But I will not allow them to make me feel bad for choosing. Freedom of choice is the fundamental right that we have. And that is, again, it's in my Facebook group, it's freedom to choose, freedom to travel, freedom to thrive. We have that freedom. We need to keep that freedom. And if we don't, we've lost pretty much everything. And so we have to stand together, strengthen each other. And I loved how you talked about those emotions, because my state in December, if somebody had told me you need to get up and fight, I don't think I'd have been strong enough, because I'd allowed all the information to really get to me. Whereas now, if somebody says to me, right, you need to get up and fight, then I am ready, because I have stayed positive. I know that throughout all of this, yes, it might take quite some time, but we will get through it. We will come out the other side. And I truly believe that light will always go over darkness. I truly believe that. There's no doubt in my mind. And you see this, it might take longer than we want. It might take longer than we hope for, but we will manage to get through this.
I agree totally with everything that you said. The masks and being so metaphoric of so much. I mean, we wear emotional masks, right? We have different personalities for different circumstances. So I've always been anti-mask, shall we say, every definition of the phrase, like of the concept. And really, masks to me are satanic symbols of submission. Mm-hmm. And I refuse to wear one. I haven't worn one once as well. And I've had a really positive experience in terms of not once has anyone tutted me or got in my face. I know that's not true for a lot of people, but I really do go over the top and above and beyond in smiling at people and showing a really positive, sentient expression back, because we don't get to see people's facial expressions anymore. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I can't even hear what people are saying because they have, 3 masks and a visor. And, we're humans and we need connection arguably more than we need food or even air. I mean, if there's one thing we cannot stand, it is to be left out and to be alone. That's what I found in my practice, that all fears ultimately boil down to the fear of being alone. Yeah. We're tribal, and literally our survival really depends upon community. And one of my favorite phrases is, community is immunity, but you're providing that community and making it okay and safe to start to play with the dissolution of consensus reality, which is really dangerous psychologically. If I look at it from a clinical point of view, this is why consciousness is constructed in helical cycles and spirals and waves, because the human psyche can only take so much at one time. And yes, some of us have become ready and some of us are not. And think back to when things were too scary for you to face. There was a time when I was too scared to face the world without a drink, an alcoholic drink, right? and that was all I could do, was try to manage that addiction. But a lot of us, have our own thresholds that we need to cross. And there is a divine plan for that. I truly believe in the good, orderly design of the natural intelligence, not only of our reality, but of how our individual lives unfold and how our individual reality bubbles are constructed. And it's really important to respect that, pay homage to that for the individual. And it is a big ask for those of us who are awake and aware and seeing the bigger picture to stop, because it can be frustrating. Got to admit, it can sometimes be so frustrating, but at the same time, we've got to meet it with compassion, with empathy, with unconditional love. That's the stuff that 5D is made of. And I love what you said about the ladder, because we're bridges in this 3D, 5D, two world split. We are the bridges, and it's up to us to kind of go, okay, are you ready? Walk with me. And that's how I see my role as, and yours is kind of, we're walking alongside everybody and we're walking each other home, essentially, is what it really is. But I noticed that you're strategically trying to connect via countries and regions. And you mentioned the word locality. And I think that's so important. Do you think there's a revolution towards like intentional living and sustainable lifestyles and just more local, small community mindsets?
Yes, I do think that even through the group, we've seen it much, much more. And when somebody posts like, I'm setting up this community, which is going to be more sustainable, the amount of people that go, I'm there, even if it's just on their thought process, it might not physically be, they may not be ready for that. And that again is a huge thing. And actually what's interesting is that as a child, that was what my mum had wanted to create for us, this kind of community where it was self-sustaining. And even as a child, I did not feel ready for that. And I remember thinking, I'm not ready to be in a tiny community with only those people. And now when I look back on those feelings that I had, I think, well, actually, I think it's because I knew that I had a bigger purpose, which was to connect with more people. And so, I ended up going to a mainstream French school, which was awful. It was terrible. I was terrible at spelling in French. And basically, and I remember every single week, the teacher, she was a nasty lady, would make me stand on the chair and tell me I was stupid and that I would amount to nothing because I would get 0 out of 20 in my spelling test every week. And so standing on that chair, and I remember very strongly, I would say to myself over and over in my head, it's totally untrue. You are amazing. And I remember those feelings. And then I go home and I tell my mum, and she would say the same to me. You remember that is totally untrue and you are amazing. And so for me to then go through my life and then become a teacher myself, which some people think, well, that's a bit crazy. I became a primary teacher myself. And I became the type of teacher that was, I remembered those feelings that that teacher created for me. And I remember those feelings that many teachers created for me. And in life, there's teachers all over the place, right? There's life teachers, there's life coaches, there's teaching, and there's lessons in all walks of life, even as an adult. And so those teachers, no matter what their position is, it has to be through love, caring, and nurturing. because otherwise it's more traumatic. And like you said, we are this bridge. We are trying to bridge people across to this situation. And we have to do that with care, love, and attention. And if we don't, then the traumas are much more intense, and it will take them significantly longer to wake up to that situation. With regards to the communities, I do feel that more and more people are trying to go that way, and I often think about our little country here in the UK, and I just think, is it even big enough to be able to do that? Are there spaces around the UK that have got, those places where people could create that community? And I actually don't have the answer to that question. I know that there are some dotted around the place. And with any sort of thing like that, it's going to be a journey for whoever gets involved with it. And I think it could be a really exciting journey. But I also feel the same way as I did as a child. If I go into this community and I'm okay, I'm in this community, I feel safe, I'm not able to help more people to join this side of the bridge. I'm not helping more people. And so, although, yes, there's many times I think, oh my goodness, right, that's it. I just want to join a community and then I don't need to deal with anything, none of this rubbish. And, I don't have to fight for my children's rights, all of that, because it is tiring. It's exhausting, isn't it?
Yes.
But then I feel like I have an important role to play, and that in any kind of team or environment, the only way to make changes is for your numbers to be high enough. And if I just go off and I kind of end up in a smaller community where everything's great, I can't have an impact necessarily on more people seeing what's going on. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But I just think it would be amazing, wouldn't it? It would be amazing to have, even if it's just to go visit and just say, I need a bit of a respite from the real world, and just to come into this lovely nurturing world would be great.
Yes, I agree. And I sort of intuit that is the wave of the future. But those of us who are in more of a quote unquote leadership role, and I mean that by, leadership is to empower others. Leadership is merit-based. Leadership doesn't say, follow me. Leadership says, I'll go first, and we've all been in training in that. You described your childhood so beautifully. And it's like, you've been in training for that your whole life because you're used to being the metaphorical black sheep of society, right? You can kind of sustain going, right, okay, it's okay to be the outcast here. But you also have nurtured that need for being a part of something at the same time. And that's the creation that you're a part of now. And you are literally making as a result of that healed wound. And I think that's so beautiful. I mean, it literally makes me want to cry. Like, and that's so inspiring to me. And I hope it's inspiring to other viewers and listeners, because all of us have such an important piece to give. We all have our own offerings in our own unique ways. No one person can do it all. I often think, oh my God, am I doing enough? Because I've been awake since 2012 and tried various ways of waking people up, and I'm constantly trying to improve and expand my repertoire of healing modalities and practices, both for myself and for anybody who might make use of my skills or that particular methodology. But ultimately, it's been like watching a slow motion car crash for the last decade. I could see it just the goalposts going like this and then going like this and going like this. It truly is the totalitarian tiptoe. Yeah. And it's like that mother lioness thing that keeps coming up between us was activated when it was like, right, it's now in my children's faces. Like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And, to step up, to take action, and also to really, I think, look at holding ourselves back, as you mentioned, a little bit, Don't just jump into 5D and stay there. There's a reading that I love that talks about standing at the gates of heaven. And you can think of this very metaphorically or spiritually, not religiously. And how it's, if you make it to heaven, it's your job to stand at the gate and help people in. And I forget the reading. I'll try to find it and post it below. But it's so beautiful. And it always comes back to me. And when I heard you talking, I was like, she's standing at the gate. And you know the importance of that, because it would be easy to just want to just go, right, I'm just going to go off into the forest and and hide away and not do anything about this reality. But what does that mean for the future? It's our duty to seed the consciousness of the future for our children, for humanity. That's what we're here to do. And it all boils down to being of service to the great creation. You know,
Absolutely.
It really, really does. I'm wondering what trends you're noticing, because obviously you go through a lot of these posts every day. You're having to weed through things left, right, and center, ward off the censorship. What other trends are you seeing in terms of the communities?
Yeah, so a lot of people are really stepping up for legal proceedings and making sure that people have, and this is really, really powerful, is letters. We are in a society where it is, law, and of course, we all know that there's a huge difference between, what's going out right now and the foundation of what's right and wrong in terms of the law, in inverted commas. But what is really powerful is where you've got lawyers and you've got amazing people who are creating responses that can go directly to schools and to jobs, because so many people are almost, 100% being forced or coerced or threatened almost to lose their livelihood if they do not have that jab, right? They are literally on that brink. And so they are kind of like, what do I do? So I either do this, go against everything that I believe in, knowing what's in this and what risks are there, or I lose my job, which is it is disgusting that they have got to that point. So these amazing, amazing people who have created these letters, they have created all these different kind of pacts for fighting against those, because it's not acceptable. It is not acceptable. Even rulings in the European, is it Council? I never remember names very well. But basically they've ruled that you cannot, it's not mandatory. Now, if it is not mandatory, you cannot be told or threatened with your job. There's got to be a way around it. Now I'm not talking about healthcare. Healthcare is a whole different ballgame. And that is way more intense. And I desperately feel like brokenhearted for all those wonderful people like nurses and doctors that literally spent their lives learning how to help and save people's lives. And now they're told, if you don't do this, you lose your job. That's a whole other ballgame. And there are people out there that are fighting for them. There are 100%. And stand your ground, delay it as long as possible if you possibly can, but find out more information and get information, because there are people fighting for those healthcare professionals, 100%. If you are not in the healthcare professional, there's all sorts of things that people need to know, like easily, if that wasn't in your contract when you started your job, it's not in your contract. So you don't have to do it. But it's all those little things that people just, again, it's looking down to what's in those contracts, looking at who can support you. And there are loads of people out there that can, and just looking those up. For my son's school, there's a lovely Facebook group called Us for Them, which is for parents. And it gives you those resources and those letters to take to schools. And I did that right at the beginning, even before they went back. So literally right at the beginning. You did too, probably.
Yep, right there with you, babe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that he was accosted multiple times in an aggressive manner. So I went back and I basically quoted, Equalities Act, all of this really intensely. And I said, I've got a lawyer. Next time this happens, I'm taking you to court. And we've never had, not even a comment, not even an email, no, nothing. We've never had anything since. And so my son walks in confidently without his mask. Bless him, of course, he's the only one in his class. They're all in their masks in the classroom, which is just heartbreaking. But do you know, our children who manage to do this, because this is hard for them. This is where they are having to stand up. And there will be parents in here that hear this and they think, well, my child has decided they need to wear the mask, right? It's not their fault. It's not their fault. And again, it's not a judgment. Like, yes, my son has stood up, but I gave him that choice. I said, I understand if you feel you need to wear this as a protection for you against the peers, because school is a scary place. Secondary school is quite intense. And the same with people in shops. Some people desperately can't because they're so scared. But what we're trying to do in this group more than ever, and like you explained, is giving people the legal strength, knowing that by law, nobody can force you to do this. The same with those tests at school, those poor children are having to have. Nobody can force them to do it. And that's by law. And if you know that, you feel strengthened anyway, because you know that actually, do you know what? They have nothing they can say to me. It's a choice at the moment. It is a choice. And so we need to make sure that enough of us are coming up against this so that it stays a choice. And I really feel very strongly about that.
Me too. And that's optimizing our free will and protecting our rights as sovereign, sentient beings. I cannot say it enough. And I think it's the Nuremberg codes, I think, that it violates. And there's so many loopholes and like little cracks in the Ahrimanic or Luciferian infrastructure that we can just slip right through. Because actually, as far as I understand it, we have to they have to give us our ability to retain free will. Like that's a universal law, right? So there will always be an out if you look for it. But often, like with a 12-year-old girl, like my little girl, my oldest, she doesn't want to go and be the only one not in a mask. She said to me, Mom, no one will want to partner up with me in science. They'll think I give them COVID, And that's what we're up against. And it's absolutely devastating. It's disgusting and it's heartbreaking. As a parent, I say, no, I do not consent, but the threat of the COVID passports and having it mandatory in things like schools is imminent in the UK. It does feel like it's encroaching upon us quite significantly. I mean, do you think there are viable ways of getting around that?
I think that as long as, and this is again, it's kind of as long as we keep those, those lawyers and all of those people who are, looking into this, and there's constant court cases going on. We just don't ever hear about them. They are kind of underground, because if people get word that actually this is against the Nuremberg Code, then more people will step up and go, actually, do you know what? You're right. This is not acceptable. So they don't want this to get out. They definitely don't. And I think that this is, again, part of our responsibility, is that by stepping up and more people seeing people in shops without masks makes them question, how can they not wear a mask? How is that okay? And then they might look into it more. They may not. They may not be ready, but they may start to wake up from that. With regards to like the digital passports and things like that, I truly hope, and this is again, we just don't know. And again, it's one of those where from the very, very beginning, I've said, when world wars come, they don't come that day and start. They start very progressively. And in a way, it's like, there's an analogy that I talk to my boys about, and it's about a man in the desert and he sees a sandstorm coming. I don't know if you've ever heard of this story. So he sees a sandstorm coming. So he sets up his little tent and he gets inside, and it's tiny. His camel cannot fit in. And yet his camel kind of talks through the tent please let me in. The sand is whipping me. And so gradually he lets his nostrils in, then his head, then his ears. And then all of a sudden, the camel is in the tent and boom, there's no room for him. And he ends up outside. This is what has been happening with tiny pieces of information that we are allowing those, the government and people to tell us things what to do gradually. So nobody really notices that those rights are disappearing. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're outside, they've lost their rights, and they hadn't realized that that was coming. The ones we can see this. We can see these progresses coming. We can see little things happening. And so I think that as long as, and this is why it's an intensity for us that is quite exhausting, really. It is quite exhausting. And that's why we have to make sure that we self-care, because we have to stay strong. But we have a responsibility to keep standing up and to fight back. And whether that's a school at a time, and you're literally allowing teachers or people to see that actually, do you know what, how weird, if every single person in the school, nobody ever didn't come with a mask, or nobody ever said, I'm not having the test, they just see that as perfect, it's normal. It isn't normal and it's not right. And the more people who stand up against these things, and there's amazing, what are they called, where they do, I've lost the name of it, where they do, I've literally lost the name of it. It's where basically you get a poll of people who say whether or not they agree or don't agree with it. So it's like a poll, and there's lots of those out there for whether or not, passports should be okay for going to a pub or a cafe or whatever. There's a lot of those polls going on. So enough people need to respond to those so that they know, so the government know, if they push this through, there's an uprising coming.
Yes.
Because if they know that the people are speaking and the people are saying, this is not okay, then they won't push it through. They want favor of the masses. They absolutely want the favor of the masses. And so what we are trying to achieve is for more of the masses to start to wake up and see that if they do not start stepping up now, then it will be a very difficult journey. I'm not saying it will be over, because I don't believe that. I just think it will be a much more difficult journey.
I'm with you 100%, to use our power of no. And we outnumber the millions to one, and that's the irony of it all. The powers that were, I call them. And it's, I have had moments of feeling battle weary in this journey, definitely. And it's really heartening to see the newly awakened kind of take the ropes a little bit and move up the ranks and start to march on in their own crusade in their own way, to say no as well, to rise up, because, fostering these subcultures is what it's going to take to get us together. We need to organize. We need to, become really kind of aligned and coherent in our cause in order to amplify the signal and become stronger and stronger. This is about potency. And it doesn't mean we don't have to win the kind of the 51% majority vote, because coherence is so much more potent. I'm always banging on about this, than dissonance and then lower consciousness states of being. And we're electromagnetic beings, of course. So the more of us who wake up, we hold the signal and make it easier for others to wake up too. This is actually scientific fact. And you can look into Heart Math Institute studies to prove me right on that one. But I was wondering about specific countries, because so many people, especially here in the UK, are going, oh, it's crap here. I just need to move. Like, are there any countries flagging as kind of hotspots for this kind of subculture and revolution?
Yes. So it is really interesting, because people are like, right, I need to go. But actually, what's been fascinating, even with like my mum lives in France still, there's people who have been communicating from Spain, from Portugal, from different countries, kind of as a reality check, that actually here in the UK, we are much better off than a lot of these other countries, like much better, because we have kind of a definite stance of what's acceptable, and I will stand up for my right, and you can. Whereas in some of these other countries, they don't care. And so if you're not wearing a mask, that's it. If you're not home by 6 o'clock, you're getting a fine no matter what. Now, obviously, we all know that most of these fines will not stand no matter what anyway. My mum's had quite a few fines and she's never paid any of them. She's not going to be paying any of them. But there are, like, Costa Rica is a hot spot for sure in people's conversations, and Mexico is a hot spot as well. So what's exciting about those is that they're sharing that obviously they're huge countries, and so there's definitely space for those communities to occur, which is really, really exciting. But I think with any country that is not your home, you have less rights if something goes wrong. So that's my concern with it, is if, like, somebody just goes, right, that's it, I'm going to wherever. But if say, for example, like, you know, there has been incidents of this where, you know, presidents or people have, you know, passed away suddenly within some of these countries. And so things will then change, and we don't know what that change will look like. So sometimes there is an element of, you know, it's better the beast that you know, isn't it, really? And that you know, and yes, this country, that there's definitely things that we need to get better at and rise up and definitely strengthen. But I think countries like France, they are known for revolting, like they are known for their protests. That is just, they are known for that. And they are doing that, but it's not in the news, like huge, big protests. And it's not in the news because they don't want people's mindsets to go, yes, they're right, I join this kind of movement. Now, sadly, a lot of violence. I know
we are the news. I can't refrain from saying it.
Yeah. Sadly, a lot of that comes with violence. And I definitely believe that there is no need for violence up until a point. Like, there definitely isn't. And there's always people who lose out, who are not involved in the situation, like, you know, cars being set on fire and things like that. And that's really harsh in my mind. I just think, oh, you know, that's that person's car. They probably don't have enough money to buy a new one, you know, those sorts of things. But it's definitely a movement that is happening across the world, but we are not finding out about it. So and another thing that happened this summer, so we were in France this summer, and my mum has some lovely, lovely friends, and we were talking about the vibrations that everybody has, you know, genuinely on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you are feeling desperately lost, desperately low, they are winning. Yeah, because what more do they want in this world than all of us to feel low and lost? Because then all over the world, everybody's feeling that down, low and suppressed. Whereas if we make sure that we look after ourselves, our well-being, our mental health well-being, we strengthen ourselves, those vibrations stay much higher. And actually, the whole world, like it is together collectively, it really has a huge impact, massively.
Yes. They keep us stuck in the fear time loop, and they use emotional manipulations to keep us, what I call, in the lower triangle, in the lower three chakras, in survival and in sex and power. And then we squabble against ourselves, and the divide and conquer strategy works great for them. They don't really have to even lift a finger, you know? Absolutely. And that's the thing. I think I was going to just mention Turkey. Also, I think looked a bit more free than some of the other countries.
Yes, they have just recently, haven't they? They've just literally announced that they're not going to be requiring tests, etc. So it's fine if you're going there. If you want to come back, that's where there's the kind of more challenge with the UK, is like what they're putting in place. And again, you know, in my mind, I think, how by law they're not supposed to do anything that will cost you money. So how are they getting away with this is the first question. It doesn't make sense to me. It does not make sense.
No,
because
it doesn't compute. Yeah, 100%. And also on the flip side, I've seen a lot of people in the UK say, no, I'm going to stay and fight. And not with violence, but with heart. And if we fight from heart, if we fight from that fifth dimensional consciousness, then we're not fighting with might. We become martial artists. We instead fight with the power of the universe, the power of creation that is flowing through us. Yeah. And that's the way that we get around this. That's the way that we literally transcend all of these dark agendas and find our way to the light. It's shedding the light of consciousness on all of it. And all of the horrors and all the atrocities that I know we don't want to look at. And I think our own protectivisms, like on a collective level, come in, to protect the collective ego. And it's time to just break down those filters one by one and make it okay for somebody else to start to look at it too.
Yeah, totally. And shining bright, I think that it is when you are walking around without your mask, around people with the masks on, they are dull. You can see it in their faces. They are struggling. And so when you come in and you have that smile on your face, and I promise the first time when I remember because, like I said, I get affected by people emotionally kind of not liking me. And I know that's, there's an element of, I as I've grown older, I have got stronger, but this kind of thing was so new. I hadn't practiced, so I'd never experienced it before. And so going into this shop and having people stare at me like I was dirty and an awful person was a new experience to me. So I had to strengthen myself to be able to get through that without. And so, but shining bright attracts people to what you're doing. And I remember I was in a shop and there was a gentleman in front of me and he was struggling so much breathing in his mask. And then he took it off and he said to his wife, well, she hasn't got one on. And I said, yes, and you don't need to wear one. It looks to me like you're struggling to breathe. So look, it's on the government's website. You are exempt. And then he literally looked at me like he said, I am so glad that I have met you today. I was meant to be here today because I needed to hear that. And then his wife took her mask off and said, that is just the best news ever. So there were two people. It's just, it is just powerful. We have so much to give in this. So many people desperately are struggling with those masks. And they need somebody to say, you don't have to do that. You don't have to. And I've done that quite a few times if I've noticed people struggling. And every time they've taken it off.
Amazing work. Absolutely love it. And one thing I've noticed as well on the group is that people are still traveling. They're getting around it more so than we think. Again, it's not really highly publicized, but there's a lot of people going from country to country and they're finding those loopholes. They're finding ways. They're being creative and resourceful and inventive. Yeah.
Absolutely. And my mum is one of them. She literally recently went to Belgium. Then she messaged me, I'm in the Alps. And I'm like, yes. She went to Andorra and no, she will not do any tests. She will not do anything. So literally there are 100% ways. I don't know if it's charm or whatever, because I haven't had that conversation with her yet. She said she leaves her phone in various places. She doesn't always take it with her. Just because we all know what that does, doesn't, the ability that they have to see where we all are with our phones. So yeah, but it will be an interesting conversation. And I think the other thing that was really important as this group grew was that we could create a platform where we could talk about those things. And I think you mentioned about uniting and strengthening together. Now, one of the hardest things I find is not sharing the truth in the Facebook group, because I know that will potentially shut it down. So when we created the awakenchoice.net Facebook page, we created it as a forum area as well, so that we can genuinely rise up, we can organize events, we can organize gatherings, and nobody can tell us that we can't post this. And that's what was really, really exciting.
Yes.
And there's lots of people getting involved. You know, you've got awakened businesses, you've got awakened hosts, and it's just so nice to see how many people are awake, and they have beautiful places in the UK. There's absolutely stunning places in the UK that we can go.
Oh my God, I was blown away. Not to mention like whole villages you can buy in Spain and Portugal. So there's so much potential and there's so many options emerging. It's like, how can people get more involved in the website? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I know we're running out of time here.
Absolutely. So it is, now when we started looking into this, it was, and again, I did not plan to set up this Facebook group. I had no idea how it would just suddenly explode. And so with that, well, it's obviously very, very exciting, but it also comes at a cost, and a cost of time, 100%, but also because I don't have enough hours to do this. Like I am a mum. I run 2 other businesses. So I am having to pay for admin to kind of step up, because otherwise the thing that I found most difficult was not letting people's posts in quickly enough would get people upset. And so I feel like I'm letting them down. And there's been many, many, many nights where I'm like, I've got to get these posts down, and I'll be up until whatever time at night, like 2 a.m. regularly. And then I was like, I can't sustain this, because I will lower my vibrations. I will lower my health and well-being. So I can't do this, even though my biggest passion is to make sure that I'm helping people. And so I do, and I still do, hours and hours on average a day. But so we had to find a way to make that sustainable. So we created the awakenedchoice.net website so that hosts could put their businesses on there, and that people could put their businesses on there as well. But we also know that, I didn't want to make it really expensive. And I thought if we all share the cost, then it's a tiny amount for us and a smaller amount for the businesses. So then it's completely shared. Whereas if it's to make it sustainable, because I am not IT, I literally am not at all. So I can't even upload stuff to the website, all of that. Some people find that really easy. That's just not me. So I have to pay somebody to do that. So even uploading people to the website, I have to pay for it. So we had to kind of think, well, how could we do this? And I spoke to lots of different people, and they said, do you know what? I would pay £5 a month to be a member of a closed community where we can talk about whatever we want to talk about. And then it's just a tiny, tiny amount. And I was like, well, ideally, I wanted to make it free, but then I would have to increase how much the businesses and the hosts were doing. So we settled at £3 per member. So for £3, that member will also have access to the discounts at these different hosts venues. They also get access to a monthly wellbeing event that's online. And then, of course, the forum area that is not monitored, that won't have stuff removed, and creating a really close-knit community. The other issue that we have as well is that, if it was free, anyone who may have malicious kind of dealings could join as well. So that is why we kind of created it in this way, so that it spreaded the load of the amount of money for everyone, and so that can continue growing, so that we can pay for admin to support the Facebook group. And actually, how I said injustice is one of my biggest flags.
Yes.
So I have had some quite intense comments back recently in the last couple of days saying, well, Facebook is free. Why are you making people pay? And I genuinely, it hit me way harder than I thought it would. And I just thought, that's not fair. They don't see me. The minute I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm doing a couple of hours before I'm supporting the kids, and then throughout the day, and then put the children to bed, and then literally from 7:30 until 2 in the morning to try and get all of these posts in. And then, of course, throughout the day, there's different things we have to deal with to support and make sure that nobody is being upset, you know? So
yes.
it's so much time. I never even knew. I didn't plan to do this group, but
it's a lot of work.
It is. And thankfully, I had lovely people come to me and say, look, Cathrine, you have to create money elsewhere to pay to run the Facebook group. Because Facebook group don't pay you money if you, with all these people, they don't do anything. You know, it's not like on YouTube, if you had followers, you know, that were that many followers, they start to pay you, don't they? And that's not the case. So so we had to find a way. Now, I'm a true believer, like obviously my background, I don't think I actually shared my background fully, but basically when I was about 7, my mum had a nervous breakdown and we ended up in the south of France, homeless at the top of a mountain in a tent through winter. We had no money whatsoever. And so we had to sing in the streets to get money. I understand the value of money. Like I do not freely use money. I do not freely, you know, and so my connection with money is I want it to be of value to people. Yes. And so when I was setting up like awakenedchoice.net, I was not thinking, oh, how could I get money from people? That was never my intention. And at the moment, you know, the Facebook group is costing me loads of money and that doesn't come back and it won't come back for quite some time. But I understand that for now, I need to make sure that those posts are getting in. So I need to be spending that money to make sure that Facebook group keeps going. And again, you know, it's kind of the value to what we can create in this environment for that tiny amount per month is huge.
It is, exactly. Minimum investment, maximum return, maximum value. Yeah, it's a no-brainer to me. And I see exactly why you had to do it. And I'm glad you could clarify that for us.
Yeah. No, so thank you for asking.
Well, thank you. So where can people find you?
So there's obviously the website, so awakenedchoice.net. So that is the website that you can, you know, look at which way you want to get involved. So if you're a host, there's availability on there. If you're a travel agent or a business as well. And then if you just want to become a member, there's also that availability for that closed forum area. And then we've got the Awakened Travel Facebook group. And I will say just quickly on that, if you are, please make sure you answer the questions because otherwise the delay is huge to let people in because we're trying to protect the group. So we only let people in who answer the questions. And right now, there's 10,000 people who haven't answered questions, literally sitting there.
Wow.
And because of how I am, I'm like, we can't just get rid of them. I have to take time to check to see if they are awake. But of course, that's a mountain and a mammoth task. So I kind of do a little bit of that each day to try and let more of those people in. I don't want to just, you know, because if you invite somebody, sometimes they don't get the questions. And so it's, it's more of a get them to search it so they then find the questions might be the better tip as well. So, but thank you so much for having me on today. It's been such a pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. And I'm so grateful for all the service you are doing for humanity. You've got your hands full, clearly, and you're being so responsible about it. And that's the theme, taking action and responsibility. So thank you for being such a beautiful leader from that beautiful heart-based 5D space. And I really hope to connect with you again soon and just see how it's all going. Well, I'll put all the details down below. Guys, you got to check it out. It's an awesome site, such a breath of fresh air. And I just think you are rocking it. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, lovely. Have a wonderful day. We'll speak soon.
Bye.
Lots of love. Bye.